I like how on cop cars, to protect and serve is in quotes, like they're being sarcastic.
Okay, before you get all worked up about encroachment upon your love for edgy, dark humor, hear me out. We all make jokes about things we love and hate. It's innate human nature to find things that are funny, and at times it involves finding humor in subjects that are considered taboo. Psychologists in the past have viewed humor as something that is done to show superiority or as a defense mechanism. However, over time its positive effects came into light. Speaking of which, let's take a trip down memory lane and see how stand-up came into being. Don't worry, it's pretty funny for a history lesson. Starting in the 1960s, comedy started shifting from prop-based performance and started taking a confrontational edge.
The most shocking comedian of our time, Lenny Bruce. Here he is.
No, I promise continuity, I'll behave myself.
Comedic geniuses like Lenny Bruce are known to pave the way for what we love to watch as performance arts today.
You might be interested in how I became offensive.
You could argue that comedy was easy back then without all the social restrictions that we have today. But funnily enough, he was arrested for making a joke about the former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, followed by scatological jokes. Moving on to the 1970s, George Carlin took the stage, and he went off like a cannon with his words, with complete disregard for what can and cannot be said. Mentored and launched by his idol Lenny Bruce, he also got himself arrested. And how does he come back from it? By landing himself a niche space on HBO, which let him say whatever he wanted. One of his most popular bits, called 7 Words, gave him the push to fame he needed.
So you gotta kind of watch out what you're gonna believe from him. The trouble is, I was trying to find out what these words might be, and I wanted to know the ones that you could never say on television. I mean the filthy words that are always filthy. There are a lot of these little two-way, double entendre words that have two meanings, words that are okay part of the time. I call them like part-time filth. Some of these words, they're only 50% dirty. You have words like ass. Ass is hardly even a dirty word anymore, but it has a few meanings that you can't say on television. That's what I was talking about. What can you say on television? That's another one of those places where we can't use these words all the time. But some of them are all right some of the time. Ass is all right on television. You can say on television things like, well, you've made a perfect ass of yourself tonight. But you can't say, hey, let's go get some ass.
Carlin specialized in content which had a lot to do with freedom of speech and touching on topics that were sensitive at the time about drugs, Vietnam, and America's uptight attitude towards sex. I cannot skip the 1980s without talking about one of my favorite comedians, Eddie Murphy. Eddie landed a special on HBO called Delirious, which he now looks back at and cringes, as he has said to the media, and rightfully so. Some of the jokes in there are pretty homophobic, but what is interesting is he punches up to the authorities when it comes to racism. Not to say that it's justified in any way, but it shows the dynamics of the society then and how certain social issues were more relevant than others. Which is why Chris Rock's 1996 special on HBO called Bring the Pain gave him the title of The Voice of the Generation. It is evident he had already anticipated mixed reactions from the crowd from his usual upbeat attitude and swagger. He went ahead with his political jokes and continued punching up to white supremacists globally. It is interesting to see how humor has always been around to get a conversation going about sensitive issues. Psychologically speaking, that is not surprising because we as humans use humor as a coping mechanism at some level. But we keep hearing that intent is a crucial part in humor. When we talk about intent in comedy, it's a volatile topic in itself. Disparaging humor, or simply put, derogatory humor, is paradoxical. On the surface, we see a statement being made that is hostile to a group, but alongside it is an implicit message that it's just a joke, so it's not hostile. The problem with prejudice-changing humor is that the audience must understand and appreciate that intention. And there is no guarantee that they will. Looking for a metaphor to represent another way sensitivity and comedy mingle, I came up with this. Imagine that the social norms about acceptable and unacceptable ways of treating women are represented by a rubber band. Everything on the inside of the rubber band is socially acceptable, and everything on the outside is unacceptable. Unfortunately, sometimes humor expands the bounds of acceptable behavior to include responses that would otherwise be considered wrong or inappropriate. Sexist men then feel free to antagonize women in this context of acceptability. I was told about the Overton window, meaning how politicians have been using this social spectrum of ideas that are presented to us to change our perspective on issues from radical to expected and even acceptable at times. In the Overton window of comedy, there are comedians who present wildly dark humor which edges on picking on the wounds of the target audience, but there are also comedians who present jokes which fail to work because there is not enough edge to it. A certain perspective will let you know that political rallies and comedy shows are mostly about ideas that are presented in highly different ways. If you think about it, political rallies are not too different from comedy shows in this aspect. In the Indian stand-up scene, there are a handful of comedians who even attempt using humor as a way to talk about sensitive topics. Varun Grover and Kunal Kamra are two prominent comedians who have taken the stand of talking about politics in their content.
वो है जो इस समय हम जी रहे हैं, जिसके ठीक बीच में हम हैं, इंडियन इलेक्शंस। कास्ट निकाल दो इलेक्शन में से, लोग परेशान हो जाएंगे। वोट किसको देना, काम पे वोट देना है, ऐसे कैसे? लोग एकदम उसके ठीक बीच में हम हैं और इस समय इलेक्शन चल रहा है और वर्ल्ड मीडिया बड़ा फैसिनेटेड होता है इंडियन इलेक्शन से कि ओहो क्या बात है, डांस ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी जैसे एक ना बड़ा सोफिस्टिकेटेड सा क्लासिकल डांस चल रहा है, यहां आके देखेंगे नंगा नाच हो रहा है। जो गंद मची हुई है जिसके ठीक बीच में हम लोग इस समय खड़े हैं। कांग्रेस के कैंडिडेट हैं।
Why is JNU an issue? Why? They are university students. Why is that an issue? JNU वाले एंटी नेशनल है। हम लाइक ये स्टूडेंट्स है, ये लोग देश को गिराएंगे। हम लाइक इनका कैंटीन में उधारी है। लाइक इसको कोई मेदू वड़ा नहीं दे रहा। तेरे पास न्यूक्लियर वेपन है। अगर JNU इशू है तो मेरे घर के बाहर का घू भी इशू है। लाइक रोज एक टैक्स पे घू को डॉज करके काम पे जा रहा है।
On a similar note, Daniel Fernandez, in my opinion, has taken on issues that are ever present in the Indian society. His material covers topics like feminism, marital rape, student suicide, and so much more.
Okay, I am a feminist, right? I believe men and women should have equal rights. Is that okay? Right? And feminism is a good thing. It's a good thing. It's done a lot of good for us. But today, there are some people who have become very extreme with their approach to this, right? Like today, there is terrorism in feminism. Huh? People are scared to even say the word, right? And we all know someone like this. We all know one idiot like this, right? Like they're very aggressive. Huh? They believe women are superior, men are the enemy. And they cannot stand phallic-shaped objects. Like no wonder people assume that their driving is terrible. Because every time they have to change gears, they get angry. I will not conform to this masculine display of superiority.
In terms of how our country handles dissent, there are no two opinions that it's flawed on many levels. Most issues end up taking a violent turn, and the fact that some people use humor to talk about it makes it even worse at times. Outrage for comedians here has come in the form of death threats, wild comments being made about their family, and even actual violence, to state a few. While some outrage online is justified, most of it is just ignorant and misplaced. It is very similar to some of the content being put forth by comedians who are in the spotlight and take their freedom of speech as a way to justify their ignorance being on the wrong side of the laughter. That being said, I started my research on this topic with the biased opinion that there is little scope for sensitivity in comedy. But the truth is, sensitivity is a necessary part of everything. It's just that it gets morphed into a complex web of what is right and wrong when it comes to comedy. So the next time you get offended by a joke, make sure that you question who you're being offended on behalf of. Do they really need your voice to express their concern? And most importantly, make sure you express your opinion in a constructive manner if it really needs to be done. If all of this is too much work for you, just remember that a joke isn't nearly as bad as the problem itself.